Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
My dog went flying through the air over the tree, and I don't know how it did it.
Okay.
Deep in Bigfoot Territory, Episode 8. Mica Mountain and the William Rowe Encounter of 1955. This is a Squatch Mafia documentary. In October 1955, one of the most famous historic Bigfoot sightings occurred on Mica Mountain in British Columbia, when a man named William Rowe claimed he saw a partly human and partly animal creature while hiking. He swore in affidavit in 1957 that the creature was about 6 feet or 1.8 meters tall and covered in brown silver-tipped hair, with thick arms reaching down to its knees, broad feet, and breasts. The ape-like sighting of William Rowe marks a change from earlier Bigfoot accounts in British Columbia, which repeatedly described Bigfoot as a giant-sized indigenous person and is often quoted as the birth of modern Bigfoot description, though that name wouldn't emerge for another year. Mica Mountain is one of the peaks of the Canadian Rocky Mountains and is situated near Fraser River Valley, Harrison Lake, and other famous Bigfoot hotspots in the heart of British Columbia. At the eastern edge of the Premier Range, which is a subset of the Caribou Mountains, Mica Mountain has an elevation of 2,855 meters or 9,400 feet. In good weather, the view from the summit includes Kinbasket Lake and Mount Robson, which is the highest summit in the Canadian Rocky Mountains with an elevation of nearly 13,000 feet. The name Mica Mountain refers to the mica which was mined from the higher slopes of the peak in the early 1900s. Mica Mountain is located in a subarctic climate zone with cold, snowy winters, and mild summers. Temperatures in winter can drop below -20 degrees Celsius with wind chill factors below -30 degrees Celsius. In the valley below, the McLennan River becomes part of the Fraser River. The area includes Mount Robson Provincial Park, an 868 square mile protected area around Mount Robson. The Fraser River originates in the southwest of the park. Rearguard Falls, Kinney Lake, and the Yellowhead Pass, which forms the border to Alberta, are other prominent highlights of the park. The park was established in 1913 and is one of the oldest parks in British Columbia. It is also part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. The lower elevations of the area are covered with mountain forests of Douglas fir and black spruce. Moose inhabit the areas around the swamps and lakes of the park, while white-tailed deer and black bears live in the forests. At higher elevations above the treeline and in rocky regions, woodland caribou, grizzly bears, mountain goats, and bighorn sheep are found. Rearguard Falls serve as the final destination for many salmon during their 1,200-kilometer journey through the Fraser River to their spawning grounds in the fall. The Shuswap people, a native First Nation tribe, are the earliest known inhabitants of the area. They speak one of the Salishan languages and traditionally depended on hunting, trading and fishing to support their communities. From historic times to today, the area is notorious for Bigfoot sightings. The Bigfoot encounter story of William Rowe is one of the classics of modern-day Bigfoot lore. In October of 1955, William Rowe, a highway worker and experienced outdoorsman, was spending time near Mica Mountain. Rowe was part of a crew working on a road in the area. He found himself with a day off and decided to take a hike and scout out a good area for a future hunt. Rowe carried his rifle but was not really looking to take a shot that day. He decided to visit a rugged and isolated area on Mica Mountain where there was an old abandoned mine. Rowe had taken a grizzly bear in this area the year before. Although William Rowe's encounter isn't dangerous or violent, the detail and primatological accuracy is definitely special and fascinating. Rowe, an experienced hunter and outdoorsman, spotted a strange creature that was totally shocking and unknown to him. Before primatology was even a word, he described a sagittal crest, large trapezius muscles, small ears, flat face, long arms, and many other details. On August 27, 1957, he signed an affidavit filed on his experience. The affidavit was drawn up by the legal department of the city of Edmonton. The affidavit was in response to a request from John Green, who had asked Rowe if he would agree to make an account of his sighting while under oath. What follows is the complete affidavit of William Rowe made before the city of Edmonton, province of Alberta, on the 26th of August 1957, as it was printed in Ivan T. Sanderson's classic book Abominable Snowman, Legend Come to Life. Exhibit A. Ever since I was a small boy back in the forest of Michigan, I have studied the lives and habits of wild animals. Later, when I supported my family in northern Alberta by hunting and trapping, I spent many hours just observing the wild things. They fascinated me. But the most incredible experience I ever had with a wild creature occurred near a little town called Tet John Cache, in British Columbia, about 80 miles west of Jasper, Alberta. I had been working on the highway near Tet John Cache for about 2 years. In October 1955, I decided to climb 5 miles up Mica Mountain to an old deserted mine, just for something to do. I came in sight of the mine about 3 o'clock in the afternoon after an easy climb. I had just come out of a patch of low brush into a clearing when I saw what I thought was a grizzly bear, in the bush on the other side. I had shot a grizzly near that spot the year before. This one was only about 75 yards away, but I didn't want to shoot it, for I had no way of getting it out. So I sat down on a small rock and watched, my rifle in my hands. I could see part of the animal's head and the top of one shoulder. A moment later it raised up and stepped out into the opening. Then I saw it was not a bear. This, to the best of my recollection, is what the creature looked like and how it acted as it came across the clearing directly toward me. My first impression was of a huge man, about 6 feet tall, almost 3 feet wide, and probably weighing somewhere near 300 pounds. It was covered from head to foot with dark brown silver-tipped hair. But as it came closer, I saw by its breasts that it was female. And yet, its torso was not curved like a female's. Its broad frame was straight from shoulder to hip. Its arms were much thicker than a man's arms, and longer, reaching almost to its knees. Its feet were broader proportionately than a man's, about 5 inches wide at the front and tapering to much thinner heels. When it walked, it placed the heel of its foot down first, and I could see the gray-brown skin or hide on the soles of its feet. It came to the edge of the bush I was hiding in, within 20 feet of me, and squatted down on its haunches. Reaching out its hands, it pulled the branches of bushes toward it and stripped the leaves with its teeth. Its lips curled flexibly around the leaves as it ate. I was close enough to see that its teeth were white and even. The shape of this creature's head somewhat resembled a Negro's. The head was higher at the back than at the front. The nose was broad and flat. The lips and chin protruded farther than its nose. But the hair that covered it, leaving bare only the parts of its face around the mouth, nose, and ears, made it resemble an animal as much as a human. None of this hair, even on the back of its head, was longer than an inch, and that on its face was much shorter. Its ears were shaped like a human's ears. But its eyes were small and black like a bear's. And its neck also was unhuman. thicker and shorter than any man's I had ever seen. As I watched this creature, I wondered if some movie company was making a film at this place and that what I saw was an actor, made up to look partly human and partly animal. But as I observed it more, I decided it would be impossible to fake such a specimen. Anyway, I learned later there was no such company near that area. Nor, in fact, did anyone live up Mica Mountain, according to the people who lived in Tet John Cache. Finally the wild thing must have got my scent, for it looked directly at me through an opening in the brush. A look of amazement crossed its face. It looked so comical at the moment I had to grin. Still in a crouched position, it backed up 3 or 4 short steps, then straightened up to its full height and started to walk rapidly back the way it had come. For a moment it watched me over its shoulder as it went, not exactly afraid, but as though it wanted no contact with anything strange. The thought came to me that if I shot it, I would possibly have a specimen of great interest to scientists the world over. I had heard stories of the Sasquatch, the giant hairy Indians that live in the legends of British Columbia Indians, and also many claim, are still in fact alive today. Maybe this was a Sasquatch, I told myself. I leveled my rifle. The creature was still walking rapidly away, again turning its head to look in my direction. I lowered the rifle. Although I have called the creature it, I felt now that it was a human being and I knew I would never forgive myself if I killed it. Just as it came to the other patch of brush it threw its head back and made a peculiar noise that seemed to be half laugh and half language, and which I can only describe as a kind of a whinny. Then it walked from the small brush into a stand of lodgepole pine. I stepped out into the opening and looked across a small ridge just beyond the pine to see if I could see it again. It came out on the ridge a couple of 100 yards away from me, tipped its head back again, and again emitted the only sound I had heard it make, but what this half laugh, half language was meant to convey, I do not know. It disappeared then, and I never saw it again. Whether this was a Sasquatch I do not know. It will always remain a mystery to me, unless another one is found. I hereby declare the above statement to be in every part true, to the best of my powers of observation and recollection. Signed, William Rowe. On April 23, 1957, the Vancouver Province, a British Columbia newspaper, did write an article about the matter, covering the story. Girl Sasquatch sighted, Hunter can't fire, which included a picture of William Rowe holding the rifle he had on the day in question. The article stated, Mr. Rowe told our reporter, whatever it was, and I'm not claiming it was a Sasquatch, it was about 6 feet tall. When William Rowe had his sighting in 1955 he had with him the only gun he ever hunted with, a .25 Remington rifle, that is still owned by the family, which he aimed at the subject but could not bring himself to pull the trigger. It looked almost human, he said. William Rowe's daughter-in-law told our reporter that William spent all his life in the bush, and he wouldn't have mistaken a bear for what he saw. And he never would have told the family a lie, she said. Myrtle Walton, Rowe's now deceased daughter, was responsible for the profile drawing of what was seen on Mica Mountain. She was featured in the 1972 documentary Bigfoot, Man or Beast. She and her husband spoke of their own sightings and her father's sighting. The drawing and how it was constituted was covered too. Here is an excerpt from her interview in 1972. Join Squatch Mafia at Patreon to watch the entire documentary.
As John Green and others began to seriously investigate reported sightings, they found that many aspects of the sightings were the same. One of the first detailed drawings of a Sasquatch was made by Mrs. Myrtle Walton of British Columbia. Her father, William Rowe, had the unique experience of being able to watch a Sasquatch at close range. Mrs. Walton now tells us how it came about.
My dad come and asked me to draw a picture of this animal or human for him. He called it a Sasquatch, so he could send it to this John Green, and I drawed the picture for him, and just exactly the way he told me he wanted it drawn. There was a few things he changed on it, like he made the arms a lot heavier, and the head was different, and the breast was different, and the back part was different. So between the two of us, we patched it all up and we sent it to John Green.
A few years after Mrs. Walton made the sketch for her father, she and her husband had a personal experience with a Bigfoot. This is what they report.
Well, I think my wife and I have heard the Sasquatch. There's a swamp fairly close to the house here where we can walk out of an evening, and quite often we go down to watch moose. And one night we were down there, and there wasn't any moose around, which was strange because in the summer every night there's moose in the swamp. And it was just before dusk when across the swamp we heard this screaming cry.
There were 3 cries, screams, or horrible screams, or whatever there was. One after the other. There was silence between, and everything was just dead quiet afterwards. Just made the hair crawl on the back of your neck.
We didn't see anything, but I've heard every animal that lives in the locality at different times, and it wasn't any of those. And if I was asked to describe the sound, I'd say it was a kind of a screaming cry, and it seemed to have anguish in it. Anguish was the thing that stuck with me.
Here is an approximation to the sound that they reported hearing that evening.
The physical description given by William Rowe of the creature he observed back in 1955 is one that has held up and been repeated time and time again by alleged Bigfoot witnesses all over North America. The crowned head, thick non-tapering torso, incredibly broad shoulders, abnormally long arm proportions, wide feet, and more continue to be described by witnesses today. Most of these people have never heard of William Rowe. These similarities, reported over many decades, would seem to indicate that people are seeing real flesh and blood animals that belong to the same species. The credibility of William Rowe has never really been criticized. There are no informations that would lead to believe he might have been some sort of charlatan or hoaxer. Also, all of this took place almost 3 full years before the term Bigfoot was used in a newspaper article describing prints found by Jerry Crew in Northern California, and 12 years before the Patterson-Gimlin footage became an international lightning rod. Rowe did some interviews regarding his sighting, but later took the additional step of having a sworn affidavit drawn up detailing his experience for John Green. He simply did not have to do this. This is not the sort of action a hoaxer would take. Over the decades, the Bigfoot encounter of William Rowe became one of the classics in Bigfoot lore, and it is one of the earliest sightings known. It has been researched and documented in books by many of the great Bigfoot researchers and cryptozoologists such as John Green, Ivan T. Sanderson, Grover Krantz, and others. The area around Mica Mountain and Mount Robson Provincial Park, featuring a lot of famous places in Bigfoot lore like Harrison Lake, the Fraser River Valley and others, has remained a notorious hotspot for Bigfoot encounters until this day. Hit the like button if you have enjoyed this video on Mica Mountain and the William Rowe encounter of 1955, deep in Bigfoot territory. Subscribe to the Squatch Mafia channel at YouTube for more videos on Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and cryptozoology. Join Squatch Mafia at Patreon for more Bigfoot documentaries and encounter videos. Thank you for squatching.